Firstly, I would like to address a few things. First thing first, I would like to warn you that my internet is not that great today, so anything could happen. Internet could be interrupted at any moment. The staff members need to be very vigilant about it. You need to pay attention and see if and when the internet get interrupted, and you need to deal with that promptly. When you were doing your chantings, I could only hear part of it, or I could only hear the interrupted sound of your chanting. From what I notice, my staff members over here are rather not that anxious. They're smiling, maybe smile of anxiety. I don't know about that. Anyhow, it shouldn't be too big of a problem, but you should be prepared for it. Secondly, we should be able to finish this teaching today, the benefits of the Vajra Guru Mantra. Tomorrow is Sunday, and I think Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday we won't have classes. And if we do, I will ask the Khenpos and Khenpos to pass down the information. This is an announcement about the time in terms of the content of our next class. Initially, I thought to start our class on the Shrangama Sutra or some of those unfinished classes, but then I thought maybe I should give the teachings on a text that's composed by Shakyamun Rinpoche on the benefits of using prayer wheels. We had not taught or studied this particular text. I believe I finished translating it over 20 years ago. I believe it was back in 2001. But after translation, I had never give a teaching on it. Now that I've gifted and you've bought some prayer wheels this time, the Tibetan Lamas and Jomos, in fact, received those prayer wheels as a gift from me, but a majority of you, in fact, I had to pay for it. But you only pay for about 30% of it. Majority of the fee was covered over here. And for those of you who have not received it or got it, maybe after a few months, we'll see. Anyhow, my plan is to give you the teachings on the benefits of prayer wheels, because this is such an important information to gain, because many of you know how to use it, but you don't really know what are the things that you need to pay attention for. So I think it would be the best for you to know that. Now, we won't have classes for the 2 or 3 days, but after a few days, I will give you further announcements on when and what we're going to study later. Other than that, I don't think I have other further information or further announcements. Another thing that you need to be aware is that our class today is going to be longer. I think it's going to take almost 2 hours. You should be prepared for it. Because I don't want to rush at the very end of the teaching. If I were to do that, then the class won't be a successful class. So for me personally, I would like to take the time and properly give you the teachings. I would like to finish this text, this teaching on this text today. Let's begin our class. Tomba tukje chanla kipsham tsara ne chanra war tsergi shankam sa jawar tukji shandar yalarman jime panzo jawla soran gongje toban povro shinjir lo bushan shan shan wei miao fa bai qian wan ji nan zao yi wo jin jian wei de shu zhe yan jie ru la zhen shi yi为度化一切众生请大家发无上的菩提心啊那么我们现在呢 Let us now begin our class on the benefits of the Vajra Guru Mantra. We'll continue from last time. In fact, the Tibetan title is The Benefits on the Vajra Guru Mantra, as well as the explanation of the syllables. But I think in terms of the Chinese translation, I would prefer to use a shorter title, which is The Benefits of the Vajra Guru Mantra. In terms of the various explanations and the benefits of each syllables, they're all expounded very clearly in this particular text. We will specifically speak of each of the syllables of the 12 syllables of this mantra, and we will learn about the meaning and the representations of the 12 syllables. The teachings here the teachings that's given here is really clear. When we chant, for example, the Avalokiteshvara mantra or the Vajrasattva mantra, those are of 6 words or 6-syllable mantra, and this Vajra Guru Mantra is of the length of 12 syllables, is twice as long as the Mani Mantra. In the past 2 days, I've received many people's vows in making the aspiration of finish chanting the 100,000 times of the Vajra Guru Mantra. At the beginning of making aspiration, I myself was a little bit doubtful whether I would be able to finish it. But then, when I calculated the dates, today is 20th of August, and within 100 days we can chant 1,000 times a day for 100 days, then before December 26th, which is the Parinirvana anniversary of Pontsö Rinpoche, we should be able to finish it, and we have a sufficient amount of time. There are people, in fact, it's easy to make aspiration, but it's difficult to put that into actions, isn't it? Especially if those of you can hardly persevere all the way to the end through the maintenance of your right mindfulness, then it is going to be difficult. But when I tried it today, when I chanted the mantra for 1,000 times, it doesn't take that long. I mean, at most, it's going to take you about half an hour. There are people who would do it at all times, during work, while even driving, and doing all kinds of things. You can chant mantra. But I think the best would be that if you can chant the mantra following the liturgy, that would be the best. For example, at the very beginning, you should practice the Guru Yoga of Padmasambhava and then chant, for example, 1,000 times, and then practice a session of receiving the siddhi, which is a method of receiving the 4 empowerments, and then you can rededicate the merit. Now, the Guru Yoga of Padmasambhava is included in our liturgy chant book. It is at the very beginning of the Tsok offering of Padmasambhava. You can practice that Guru Yoga and then skip the later part of that Tsok offering, and then you can chant 1,000 times of mantra. In such a way, you can practice the whole liturgy. It is considered as a formal meditation. If you can practice it in a formal meditation session, chant the refuge and generation of bodhicitta, and then Guru Yoga, and then mantra. After that, if you have time, you can chant one praise verse, or chant offering, or the dependent origination mantra. After that, you can practice receiving siddhis, which is this kind of system is included in our practice of the Ningti preliminary practice liturgy. It would be the best for you to chant in such a way, and especially we have such an auspicious dependent origination for us to practice this mantra chanting all together. I think it would be wonderful. Please do not think that it is because we have some obstacles that's happening in the Sherdra or in doodling. That is why you are required to chant the mantra of Padmasambhava. But that is not true. As practitioners, if we were to have obstacles, we can see obstacles at all times. If we can see obstacles as something that is normal to happen in our lifetime, then whatever kinds of obstacles is not going to stop you from practicing. This year is rather very special. We have a very auspicious dependent origination, as I said, because the Tibetan Dromos and Lamas started practicing the Padmasambhava mantra. I know many of you are not too clear about how to practice it and what is the benefit of it and so on and so forth. That is why, by this auspicious dependent origination, I decided to give you the teaching on this particular text that I've translated about over a decade ago. I would encourage you not to only chant 100,000 times of Vajra Sattva mantra this year, rather you should practice this every single year so that you can protect yourself, you can protect your freedom of practice, and then if you can practice in such a way, if you can see it as an annual project or annual homework to finish, that would be really wonderful. It would create favorable conditions for your practice. Let it be staying over here in the Sherdra, or when you're not in the Sherdra. If you can do that every year, that would be really wonderful. In the past, I've requested everyone to practice the wrathful mantra of Padmasambhava or this particular mantra for 100,000 times. I've made that request, and I've encouraged you to do that every year for many years. I hope each and every year, this year included, and you can practice in such a way and you can remember it. It is not easy to study this particular text every single year, but I hope you can remember it. There are practitioners who can remember the teachings, even if the teaching was given only once. So I hope that you can be that kind of practitioner and you can chant the Padmasambhava mantra every single year as I described and as I taught. Especially, it would be even better if you can practice the Vajrasattva mantra along with the entire liturgy in formal meditation. Even if you really can't do it, even if you can't practice in such a complete and a perfect way, at least if you can practice wherever you are and whatever you're doing. In some public spaces over here in the Sherdra, some of the staff members, usually they don't really use a mala. I hope if you have time, you should still use a mala because indeed we're a Sherdra. We are a center to study Buddhism. So even if you're a staff member, you can still hold malas. You're not necessarily a government staff member or anything like that. Rather, you're a staff member over here. You're serving the Sangha. While you're standing, sitting, you should just use a mantra. You should just use the mala to chant the mantras. That being said, you should not go to the other extreme where you would only chant the mantra set but not attending your customers, not working on your post such as the receptionist or the concierge or the servers in the restaurants and so on and so forth. You should not neglect your work. It is that only when you have a little time you should practice with your mala. On top of that, you shouldn't be too concerned about having a post over here, and that is why you should not use it. You're not a CPP member, so a CCP member, you don't need to necessarily stand over there and not chanting mantras at all. Now that we are open to tourists, we can see that all kinds of people would come here. And if we ourselves, the members over here as well as the staff members over here, do not pay close attention to the whole energy in this valley, then it could change. We didn't ask to open Larangar to the tourists. However, it is done. And now there are all kinds of people who would come here as tourists. In this way, the quiet environment of the Sherdra could be disrupted. And if we were to be influenced by such distraction, if we were not to hold our mind with right mindfulness or to protect our mind, then such a beautiful and quiet center would change. In some ways, we can't really stop the changes because now that the whole world is facing a wave of tourism. On the positive side, we can probably liberate many sentient beings or create some positive changes in the sentient beings and make some good connections for them to the Dharma. But on the other, we should not be influenced by them. We should use our malas at all times, and we should chant at least mantras whenever we have spare time. I see that many of you are holding malas. That's really good. If you can chant for 1,000 times a day, that's really not difficult. It's not too much. Of course, when you're making aspirations, it is similar to make a budget planning. Just like there are people who are buying a car or houses, they're calculating the mortgage and the repayment based on their now salary. But later, their salary could change, their job's situation could change, and then at that time, maybe they don't have the capacity to pay back the mortgage anymore, and then they would suffer and they would be under tremendous amount of stress. Similarly, as practitioners, when we do the budget planning of our practice time and of our time in practicing virtue, we tend to make plans in certain ways that is not necessarily practical. It happens to me when I make the plans for my translation projects. The planning looks good and my wishes are good, but the outcome may not necessarily be exactly as what I planned for, and it is just normal. But I think what we need to do is to cultivate a sense of time management. There are people who tend to speak beautiful words, but in terms of their action, their actions do not match to their words or promises. They're Khenpos and Khenmos or ordinary practitioners. Maybe at the beginning they're all similar, but after many years, day after day, we can see because of their different activities throughout the day or different time management throughout the day, the outcome would be very different. I do not want to be too extensive at the beginning, so I should probably stop here. Now let us continue with the actual text, which is the mantra of Padmasambhava, especially the function and representation or meanings of each syllable. We practice so much of the Padmasambhava mantra, Avalokiteshvara mantra, but we usually would only understand the mantra from the perspective of, I'm practicing the Padmasambhava mantra, therefore I'm going to receive the blessings of Padmasambhava. But we don't really know what each syllable represents. are what they meant. We may be rather quite foreign to the meaning of those. But I think in this text, the teaching is quite concise and right to the point. So I think it's a great teaching. Now, Dakini Yeshitsogyo asked Padmasambhava, saying that now Lady Tokyo stated to Padmasambhava, saying that, a great master, thank you for telling us about such infinite benefits and powers. You have been immensely kind. Although the explanation of the benefits and powers of the syllables of Guru Padma's mantra is unfathomable, for the sake of sentient beings in the future, I humbly ask you to give us a brief description, she asked. Now, there are immense power within each of the syllable of Padmasambhava, but without your explanation, we won't be able to understand it. So I humbly ask you, in order to benefit the sentient beings of the future, would you please give us a concise and a brief explanation? Yeshitsogyo is rather speaking of it or making a supplication of it in a way that is not as direct as Ananda in the Shrangama Sutra. The qualities and benefits of Padmasambhava mantra is really vast. And she said that it would be really wonderful if you can give the Dharma teachings on each of the syllable, the meaning of each of the syllables. That would be really wonderful, but they must be quite vast and really long. For that reason, would you please give us the teaching on it? Because there are great masters who wrote the benefits and the qualities of the Padmasambhava mantra for a few volumes. That is why it is important to have a concise teaching. Padmasambhava then said that Om Benza Guru Padmasambhava, Benza Guru Padmasambhava. The benza is more of Amdo dialect, but you can chant it whichever way that you've studied. But we would usually write it in such a way, Om Benza Guru Padmasambhava. Padmasambhava then said that, "O noble daughter, the Vajra mantra is not only my essential mantra, it is the life essence of the deities of the four classes of Tantra, the 9 vehicles." The 4 classes of mantra includes the Kriya, Charya, Yoga, and the Anu Yoga. Also, the mantra represents the 9 yanas as well. The 9 yana includes the Shravaka yana, the Pratika Buddha yana, the Bodhisattva yana, Kriya Charya, and then Yoga, and then Maha Anu Ati, and Maha Ati Yoga. Maha Anu Adi Yoga. These 9 yanas, this is the core of the 9 vehicles. Also, the 84,000 aspects of the Dharma and so on, the heart essence of all the Buddhas of the 3 times, the lamas, deities, dakinis, Dharma protectors, and the like is encompassed by this mantra. The reason for this is as follows: listen well and hold this in your heart. Recite this mantra, write it, tell it to sentient beings in the future. When we are studying it, we can see that this is rather a very condensed version of the teaching, and this is an explanation with rather very condensed meaning, a condensed explanation. People may wonder, well, out of the 12 syllables, since all of these teachings within Tantra as well as all of the 84,000 Dharma doors is included, then do I need to chant any other mantras? Can I just chant the Padmasambhava mantra then? Well, you could, but sometimes because of people's different capacity and their are different inclinations. There are different inclinations to different aspects of the Dharma. That is why there are people who would more lean towards the Avalokiteshvara mantra or the Vajrasattva mantra, and so on and so forth. There are people who would say that, well, I can just chant the Amitabha mantra because it has so much great merits. And there are people who would say that I can chant so-and-so mantra, it would be good enough for me. Of course, all of these mantras would be sufficient to the beings who made close connections to them, auspicious connections to them. In fact, the teachings that's given by Shakyamuni Buddha can be summarized into 3 short sentences. Do not practice vice, practice all virtue, and purify one's own mind. This is the teaching by all the Buddhas. So if you can practice virtue, not practice vice, and tame your own mind, this is the teaching that is taught by all the Buddhas. But does that mean that you do not need to listen to the 84,000 Dharma doors? It is not necessary, because everyone's capacity and their foundations and their inclinations are very different. Though that we can say that theoretically, we don't need to necessarily listen to other teachings, but it is not necessarily that everyone would be able to be tamed by simply one teaching. That is why over here, Padmasambhava says that I'm going to give you teachings on it, and I hope that you can listen to it closely, listen to it with attentive attention. Now, when you are looking at the mantras, you can write it, you can recite it, and you can even chisel it on the rock. In such a way, people would be able to make connections to this mantra. When I was little, I made lots of auspicious connections to Padmasambhava mantra as well as money mantra. So I used to write it as well as chisel it on the rock. I tend to do that at all times whenever I have time. And then at the very front of the gate of Doma Monastery, because Doma Monastery has an auspicious connection to the Good Aeon Sutra, that is why I specifically make sure that we have a whole pile of money rocks chiseled with the money mantra as well as the Padmasambhava mantra. I have great devotion to the Padmasambhava mantra and the Avalokiteshvara mantra. I've made some very special connections to these 2 mantras. There are some stories with the 2 pieces of money mantra carving on rocks that's being placed right in front of the gate of Doma Monastery. I don't think I will tell you the story. I don't know if I'll ever tell you the story of it, but I definitely had a very special connection to these 2 particular carvings of money mantra. In Tibet, we have lots of chiseled rocks. Some of those are carved by others, and some of them are spontaneously manifested. The ones that's chiseled on the rocks, there are the ones that's been blessed or consecrated by great masters, lamas, and monastics. There are all kinds of the money mantra rocks. For people without faith, they probably don't believe it. But whatever it may be, Padmasambhava said that he specifically gave teachings to the sentient beings in future generation. That is why we're studying on this Padmasambhava mantra. Those of you who believe it, I don't need to convince you, and for those of you who don't believe it, I don't need to convince you either, because it is not to be convinced. trust or belief is something that is lacking in this world. Even within a family, people would argue over whether you believe in me or not, especially when it comes to love relationships. The spouses would constantly argue over whether you trust me or not, isn't it? So I think in terms of having faith or trust in the power of Padmasambhava mantra, the belief or the understanding sometimes is beyond our conceptual mind. And there are different levels of blessings and powers. For those people without faith, if you don't believe it, I understand it, because we have different. We grew up in different environments, in different educational backgrounds, and we carry different baggages of our past karma. So there are lots of intertwined, complex causes and conditions for each person. That is why I think it's understandable if you don't believe it. But I truly think if you can chant the mantra of Padmasambhava, you would notice the difference. That is why we can just simply practice the Padmasambhava mantra. A few days ago, when I give teachings on the virtuous speech of the beginning, middle, and end, I think it was a very successful teaching because many people felt that their mind stream has changed and their practice has changed and so on. Especially, many of you have developed faith to the Mani mantra, to the Avalokiteshvara mantra, especially because we studied the Liberation Sutra of Liberation as well as the Baskets Display Sutra, and it was very successful. If your mind has changed because of that, then your mind stream has been moistened or has been nourished by these teachings. Otherwise, if these teachings are not taken into your practice, and you can only become more stubborn. This time, other than listening to the benefits of the Padmasambhava mantra, I really hope that each of you could carry this teaching to your practice so that you can truly gain benefits and truly gain the blessings of the three roots. Even if not face to face, sometimes the insights and experiences could arise in your dreams. And you can be more in sync with the deity. If we can wholeheartedly pray and supplicate to the deity, then for lifetimes we will not generate any wrong views. If we were to practice in such a way, we can have great powers in benefiting sentient beings and propagate the Dharma. You can truly carry those experiences rather than only listening to the theories. If you practice wholeheartedly on the, for example, seven-line prayer and so on, if you were to practice with faith, then insights and experiences would naturally arise, and the deity would naturally take care of you, to grant blessings to you, and that is absolutely going to happen. Just like the moon in the space, it will be reflected in the different vessels that's on the ground. Doesn't matter how many vessels that you have in the ground that contains clear water will reflect the moon. Similarly, if we were to supplicate wholeheartedly, then we would definitely be able to receive the benefits of the deities. When we studied the view of Vajrayana in the Gyuragarbha Tantra, where it says that let it be the mantra itself or the sound of Padmasambhava or whatever kinds of mantra you're thinking of, in fact, they are no different than the deity. If we can practice in such a way, if we uphold such a supreme view that is of equanimity and purity, is non-dual, then Padmasambhava will come to you. Just as how a child at times of calling the mother, they would naturally show up. Mipa Rinpoche quoted from a teaching saying that if we were to chant with melodious sound of the seven-line prayer, then Padmasambhava would travel all the way from the origin Pure Land and arrive right in front of you, just like how when a child calls the mother. This example or this metaphor is quite vivid. Anyhow, it really depends on each and every one of yours connection. If you really truly can't generate any faith, I think you need to practice confession so that maybe you will make auspicious connections. Now let's look at Om Mahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava, out of which Om Mahom is the body, speech, and mind's mantra of the Buddhas of the three times. This is quoted in the benefits of the 100 mantras composed by Mipa Rinpoche. The very first mantra that he talked about was Om Mahom. This particular benefits or teachings on the benefits is also quoted. It was quoted from the text called the Tantra of Condensed Meaning, as well as the Gyalasa Madra Tantra, as well as the Kapji Tantra. Many tantras, in fact, has the teachings of that. Om Mahom is really important. By chanting it, it could burn because Om Mahom is the wisdom seed of the body, speech, and mind. By relying on the wisdom fire of Om Mahom, it could burn out the seeds of the 6 realms within our mind. So the power and the quality is really great. Now let's look at the meaning of this particular mantra. Vajra is the supreme essence of the Vajra family. And then the next one is Guru. Guru is the supreme essence of Rana family, which is the family of the East. And then of the East is the Vajra family. And then the Ratna family is of the South. Then in terms of Padma, Padma is the Padma family, and the Padma family is of the West. The Karma family is of the north, which is represented over here through siddhi. Home is the supreme essence of the Buddha family that is in the center. Om Mahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava, in fact, it is the mantra of the 5 Buddha families as well as the 5 Buddhas. The 5 Buddhas, for example, Padmasambhava, and the Buddhas as well as the female Buddhas, the protectors and the retinues, all gathered over here. At the time when we chant Om Mahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava, all the 42 peaceful deities are included within this short mantra. Sometimes when we chant the liberation upon hearing, if we were to chant the mantra of each and every one of the deities, it takes a long time as well as a lot of effort. But if we can chant this short mantra, then all the Buddhas of the 5 Buddha families, the Buddhas of the 5 Buddha families, and the retinues and so on, and their mantras are included in this short mantra. In this mantra, Om Mahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava has all the different kayas of the 5 Buddha families. Om is the complete Sambhoga kaya of the 5 Buddha families. I is the complete unchanging Dharma kaya. Hom is the complete Nirmana kaya, Guru Rinpoche. Now it has the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, the 3 bodies, the 3 kayas. Now, Benza or Vajra is the complete assembly of Haruka deities, all the wrathful deities such as Yamantaka, Kalachakra, Mahakala, all of these wrathful deities. When we practice, there are 58 wrathful deities resides on the crown chakra of our crown, the wheel of blazing bliss, that is, all the Harukas, the wrathful deities, are complete. There is the complete assembly of the wrathful deities on the crown chakra of ourselves. And then Guru is the complete assembly of the Lama awareness holder deities, all the Vidyadharas. The Pema is the complete assembly of Dakinis and powerful female deities. Each one has different deities, and for example, Pema could include all the Dakinis and all the deities mandalas, such as Kurukura and Vajravarahi and so on. And then in terms of the siddhi, it is the heart of all the wealth deities and protectors of hidden treasures. So Zambala, for example, and each of the turtles, they would hide their treasures. So that is siddhi. And then in terms of home, that is the heart of each of the every dharma protector. If we were to practice each of the deities, of the peaceful and wrathful deities, each of them could have a very extensive practice, and you probably don't have enough time to practice that. But if you want to practice them all together, then we can practice the Padmasambhava mantra, then that would be fine. Om Ahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava. Om Ahom is the heart of the three classes of Tantra. The three classes of Tantra, or three classes of transmissions. The three transmissions could be symbolic, hearing, and mind transmission. And some versions said that is three classes of tantras, but I didn't really got enough time to look into the other version, so I'm not sure. Let's see, three tantras. Maybe Kriya Chaya and yoga. But later we will talk about that. Maybe it's a general explanation of the tantras. Maybe three root tantras, three transmissions. Well, there are different versions of it. It's a little bit difficult to understand, so maybe we'll take a look at it and see if we can find a better way of explaining it. Because three tantras are explained in the later part of it as well, so we'll see. Om Ahom could be the Tantra of the Vajra body, Vajra speech, and Vajra mind. Maybe that's what the three Tantras mean. Anyhow, we can look into it later. And benza is the Vinaya and the Sutra. Guru is the heart of Abhidharma and Kriya Yoga. Vinaya, Sutra, and Shastras are the heart of the teachings of the Tripitaka. So Guru is the heart of Abhidharma and Kriya Yoga, and Pema is the heart of Upa and Yoga Tantra. Siddhi is the heart of Maha and Anu Yoga. Home is the heart of the Dzogchen Ati Yoga. All the way from the Sutrayana to Vajrayana teachings, the sutras and shastras to the tantras. For example, in the Tibetan Tripitaka, there are 104 volumes, within which there are many volumes, many texts of tantras and sutras. And this particular mantra includes all of that. Why it has such great merit? It is because all the great noble ones of the past, as well as the Buddhism bodhisattvas that had bestowed blessings in this particular mantra, just as when we study Om Mani Mani Mahamani Soha, that Om Mani Mani Mahamani Soha can be a mantra that leads to complete enlightenment, because Avalokiteshvara relied on this mantra and attained realization, attained enlightenment. There are Sangha members of different dispositions where some may prefer to chant mantras and have great faith to mantras, and some rather not. It is very much because of our different karma. Different people have different inclinations and different dispositions. Not even just as a Sangha, in fact, twins could have very different inclinations and dispositions and characteristics. For that reason, we need to tolerate everyone and different people's different dispositions and inclinations. We should not have a sense of aversion towards them just because they have different inclinations. Now let's look at the next explanation. Om Ahom purifies obscurations of the three mental poisons. So maybe this is three mental poisons includes aversion and attachment as well as ignorance. So maybe Om Ahom is a general statement. Similarly, we can see that the previous one, the three classes of Tantra, includes what is stated afterwards because it is a summary statement. Now, Vajra purifies obscuration of hatred and aversion, Guru purifies obscuration of pride, Pema purifies obscurations of craving and attachment, and Siddhi purifies obscurations of jealousy, Home purifies obscurations of delusion and disturbing emotions. It seems that the first line, the Om Ahom, is a general statement, and then there's an extensive explanation in between, and then Home is another summary to summarize the meaning of this particular way of understanding it. Om Ahom, benza Guru Padmasambhava could very much be a mantra to purify our obscurations. The different mantras could have different effects, different functions. For example, the mantra of Vajrasattva is to purify our obscurations, and the Manjushri mantra is for us to have more wisdom. They have different functions. I remember the story of how a lama went to India but encountered some bandits on the way. After encountering these bandits, he killed them. And after killing people, he had lots of regret. So he confessed in a cave retreat for 30 years. During that time, he chanted about 700 million times of the Vajra Guru Mantra, and then he attained rainbow body. His whole body at the time of death shrank 2/3 of the size, and his mala that he used to chant 700 million times of the Vajra Guru Mantra was then gifted to Tokulongto. Tokulongto spoke of it, and I wrote it down, but in terms of when and who it was, I couldn't really remember too much. But it was written down, it's been recorded. For sure, it was correct and it was genuine and true. Anyhow, that person, after chanting 700 million times of Vajra Guru Mantra, he purified all of his obstacles, purified all of his negative karma, even negative karma of killing people. For that reason, we should see Vajra Guru Mantra as a great way to practice confession as well. And then the next one is Om Ahom grants the attainment of the three kayas. Vajra grants the attainment of mirror-like wisdom. Guru grants the attainment of the wisdom of equanimity. Padma grants the attainment of the wisdom of discernment. Siddhi grants the The attainment of all accomplishing wisdom, home grants the attainment of all that stems from primordial wisdom. Sometimes we would call it as the omniscient wisdom. Sometimes we will call it as the primordial wisdom, because primordial wisdom is the root or the foundation of all the other four wisdoms. Sometimes we speak of the primordial wisdom, or sometimes not. We've spoke and studied it in the adornment of the Mahayana Sutra Shastra. When we discussed why sometimes we speak of the four wisdoms, sometimes the five. Anyhow, by chanting the Om Hum Vajra Guru Padmasambhava, you can attain three kayas and the five wisdoms. This is a mantra that would be best practiced if you want to review the wisdom, the innate wisdom. If you feel that the wisdom of three kayas and five wisdom is not sufficient, then you are simply saying that the Buddha doesn't have wisdom, because this is the wisdom of the Buddha. Now the next one says, Om Hum Vajra Guru Padmasambhava could subdue all the maras. With Om Hum, you can subdue the gods, spirits, and human beings. Sometimes human beings could transform into Mara, and female Maras, and so on. Sometimes within the God realm, the celestial beings could turn into Maras as well. Through Om Hum, one would be able to subdue the gods, spirits, and human beings. Vajra conquers the Gandharvas and the fire spirits. When we have fire of houses or forests and so on, those are because that we had irritated the fire gods, fire spirits. Now, maybe because of the global warming, the fire spirits could come up at any times, could be irritated at any times. On one hand, we should chant the Vajra Guru Padmasambhava. On the other hand, we should be very cautious and vigilant with our own behavior and activities as well, especially within the Shudra. We need to be extra careful. Our structures and our residence, I hope that you can be very careful. On one hand, we do need to chant the Vajra Guru Padmasambhava, the mantra, but on the other, simply only rely on the mantra, but not caring about all kinds of possible conditions that could induce fire is definitely not workable either. Of course, there are great qualities and benefits to the mantra, but we have to be careful of our actions as well. Now we have some of the houses, we need to be careful of the things that is easy to get burnt, especially when it's a public building. The other day I went to a monastery and I noticed that all the fire routes were closed. So I scolded the management and I said that if all these fire routes are closed, what if fire were to blaze over here? Then all of the public buildings would be burnt. It would be very dangerous. This time, the wildfire in Hawaii forced people to even jump into Pacific Ocean in order to run away from fire. And some people stood in the Pacific Ocean and look at their houses burned down to ashes. When we look at the scenes like that, we ourselves, if we can put ourselves into the shoes of the other person who's suffering from it, we can feel the pain. So learning from that, from their experiences, we need to be very careful with fire. In the past, with the blessings of the three jewels, nothing too drastic happened over here. But I really hope that all of the female practitioners, especially especially around the female practitioners, the districts, you need to be extra careful as the houses are quite dense. The residents are very dense over here. You need to pay attention, and if a fire were to blaze at mid of the night, do you know a route to escape? You need to think about that. The fire spirits can be irritated very easily. Sometimes when we burn something, and sometimes when we did something inappropriate, those spirits can be irritated right away. When we had some fire incidents in the Sherdra previously, some of those fires happened out of very strange reasons, really. When I was in school, I just remember this story. When I was in school, I believe there was once that our dorm room was on fire, and then the president came to me and scolded me for it and saying that, why didn't you pay attention? I said I was being very, very vigilant about this, but I think it must be some irritation and some furious fire spirits that made the fire to happen. And then the president was even more upset with me because I was speaking something that is considered as superstitious back then. It was indeed my fault because I was reading with candlelight. But after the fire was put out, one of my best, in fact, my best clothes, my best jacket was burnt. That was my only coat I really liked. Anyhow, now the next one is Om Benza Guru Padmasambhava. Now Om Ahom, with the Guru, the syllable Guru conquers the Lord of Death and demonic spirits, and Pema conquers the harmful water gods and spirits who reign over the mind. Siddhi conquers the powerful demons who haunt mountain ranges and passes. Now, in terms of the siddhi, sometimes it is stated as yakshas, and some of the versions says that it says that to subdue Ishvaras, and some versions says that it is to conquer the powers of the spirits of earth, or the local earth deities. Home conquers the planetary demons and gods of localities. Now, planetary unfavored planetary movements or different kinds of not fitting with those movements, it could happen as well. On one hand, I think it's important for those atheists to recognize that the spirits and maras, they do exist. I've encountered some atheists. At the beginning, they were firm atheists. They don't believe in spirits and ghosts and so on at all. But later, maybe because of their own illness, and maybe because of various experiences, or even in dreams, or even in their illusions, they finally recognized it. In Tibet, we say that wherever you would go, especially when it's a dangerous place, and consider somewhere that's dangerous, where people had died around that particular area, then we would chant the Benza Guru Padmasambhava, the Vajra Mantra. Not only in Tibet, back in 2020, a few years ago, in Foxconn, the factory that manufactures iPhones and so on, In that factory, 13 people committed suicide from jumping off the building, and they all jump off the same building at the same location. So for those kinds of incidents with lots of coincidence, we can say we don't really see things that is happening. We only see things that has happened. For example, there were drivers that would, or the car drivers that would have a car accidents at the same place every single time. Or I remember that there was a TV interviewed by a Chinese host called Wen Tao, and there was this particular case that he interviewed for a female policewoman said that when they were investigating on a particular murdering case and homicide case, and then they had no clue except until someone had a dream about had a dream of the victim, and the victim was telling them, "Oh, my body is here, and who killed me," and so on and so forth. And then they finally recognized that there are some incidents that cannot be explained. Not only through those homicide cases, there are different stories I've heard from doctors, from the prison guards, many of which truly points out that ghosts and spirits are definitely existent. As practitioners, sometimes we encounter maras in our dreams, or sometimes in terms of our body, we don't feel good, or we don't have a good mood, or we just simply can't practice anymore. Usually it is because of the disturbance of maras. At that time, when you encounter those kinds of obstacles, you should try your very best to chant the mantras of Padmasambhava, and right away that would work just as how the sun breaks out from the dark clouds. This is the qualities and benefits of the Vajra Guru Mantra, because this is a mantra that subdues maras. In the past, when I was little, after I finished school and would go home, usually it would be quite dark. I have to go through a small forest that has a very small road, and I've heard that many people died over there. On one hand, I felt really scared, especially when there are some little sizzling sounds of the mice and so on. I would get really scared, and I would chant the Vajra Guru Mantra. I definitely feel the blessings from it. Maybe it is because of my family, maybe because of my faith. Whatever kinds of obstacles, and whenever I encounter them, I would right away remember to supplicate to Padmasambhava, especially when it comes to purifying or to overcome the obstacles. I would either chant the Guru Padmasambhava, or I would chant the Tara mantra. The different mantras has different effects, just as different medicine has different functions. Now, Om Ma Hum Benza Guru Padmasambhava Hum, by Om Ma Hum, the 6 transcendent perfections are accomplished. By Vajra, all peaceful activities are accomplished. That is to pacify all the the peaceful activities to pacify all the, for example, the maras of illness, of obstacles, and so on. And then by Guru, all enriching activities are accomplished. And if you feel rather quite weak and you want to have more energy and all power, then you should chant Om Ahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava. Lots of the abroad centers, they have a different way of chanting the mantra. Sometimes it could be rather wrathful, sometimes quite peaceful and very, very graceful, and some sounds rather very much like the water streams. And pema is to accomplish all kinds of magnetizing activities, to be free from the controls of human and non-human beings. Siddhi is all enlightened activities are accomplished, and by home, all wrathful activities are accomplished. Now, the wrathful activities has to be practiced with compassion. If you can practice in such a way, then the obstacles that's created for you, or the obstacles to the propagation of Dharma, can be wrathfully subjected. Well, Om Ahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava, Om Ahom averts the dagger sorcery of Buddhists and Bopans. The Boon tradition, especially when the daggers of the Boon tradition sometimes are used as a sorcery or as a ritual for curses. I think in the mainland tradition, sometimes we see that in a movie there are people who would perform those curse rituals. They would use some needles to pierce the little mannequins that they made that resembles the person that they want to curse, almost like a voodoo doll. In some very ancient religions, those rituals for curses are quite common. In terms of Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there are all kinds of rituals that averts those rituals or those curses. Especially the most commonly used one is through the practice of the Heart Sutra. But I didn't see this in the mainland tradition. Rather, I saw that only in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And sometimes they would use that kind of practice or liturgy of Heart Sutra as a ritual or as a liturgy to avert or even bounce back the mantras or the curses. And then Vajra averts the harmful powers of the wisdom deities. Guru averts the harmful powers of the 8 classes of gods and demons, of the Nagas, of the 8 classes of Nagas, that is. Sometimes the 8 classes of Nagas are the protectors, but sometimes if they're irritated, they could also create obstacles. With the Padma, it averts the powerful, harmful powers of worldly gods and spirits. Siddhi averts the harmful powers of Nagas and gods of localities. And Home averts the harmful powers of all the 3, the gods, demons, and human beings. There are all various kinds of ways of curses and placing negative power on harmful power onto others. Well, there are different ways of doing so, but we we don't really like to speak of it because the kind of practitioners that are very good at practicing, they won't do it. And the people who are not good at practicing the Dharma, they want to do it. And that would create harm for themselves as well as others. In the past, there are different kinds of shamans that would perform rituals and chant different liturgies and so on. But as Buddhists, especially Buddhists of Mahayana, we would not use different curses to place harmful power over them. And sometimes whenever we encounter certain rishis, and rishis of the non-Buddhist schools, we do not need to be afraid of them. Because the more we are afraid of those kinds of harmful powers, we are more attracted to those harmful powers. Though sometimes the people are not cursing you or placing any harmful powers over you, but there are people that hallucinates over how others would do it. Majority of the stories or things that I've heard from the lay practitioners are like so. They're just deluded thoughts, really. People nowadays not necessarily have that kind of power, because nowadays people don't have the kinds of powers like the rishis in ancient India. Also, it doesn't work in such a way that immediately you would receive the curses or the negative powers. There are people who would hallucinate that, oh, so-and-so rolled his eyes at me. He must be doing some kind of cursing rituals to me. That is why I'm not feeling well today. In fact, the majority of it is really just hallucination and dualistic thoughts. Sometimes we would feel that so-and-so are not good to you, or they're not being nice to you, and as a Mahayana practitioner, we don't have to care about that. We don't have to be afraid. We can chant the Vajra Guru Mantra. Even if they were to successfully place the harmful powers over us, we should contemplate in such a way that we must have done harm to this person in the past, and we must have created this negative karma, this debt to them. That is why we are now clearing it out, or we're repaying it back. Majority of people nowadays, they don't seem to be the kind of people who study the Mahayana Dharma, and sometimes they're not the kind of people who studied the Gyuhar Sutra, the Mahajala Tantra. People nowadays seems to be very afraid of negative powers or obstacles. They would then go to different kinds of readers to get predictions read, and they would be afraid of demons or harmful powers placed on them, and then they would have hallucinations over it. If you're people like that, then I think you should practice more of the Padmasambhava mantra. I once heard of the story, some Dharma teacher from the Padmasambhava study center from Taiwan. He said that there was once a farmer who lived in Bhutan. Because of the curses placed by his enemy, he got blind, completely blind. And because he's blind, he can't really work. So he kept on chanting the Vajra Guru Mantra. And because of that, at the time when he finished chanting 300 million times of that mantra, he saw Padmasambhava, and then received a series of predictions from him. And then when he finished 600 million times of that mantra, he received all kinds of blessings and exhibited all kinds of signs of having those blessings. In 2006, this person passed away. And when he passed away, the whole country was amazed by the signs of achievement. And people generate great faith because of that. If our mind could relax as a practitioner, then nothing is a problem. The majority of things that turns into an obstacle is because our mind, our heart grasp onto it. Our mind fears of obstacles. If we're not, then they're not going to create harm to us. If you were to abide in a state of harm, of fear, then harm would be bestowed on you. So if you can chant more of those Vajra Guru Mantra, you have nothing to be afraid of. You don't need to worry too much. Just chant Om Ahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava Hom, and then the 5 poisons. Om Ahom crushes the forces of the 5 poisons. The previous part talks about the inner poisons, and then here it talks about the 5 poisons, the forces of 5 poisons that would create all kinds of enemies of Maras. For example, some of the forces of Maras are created by hatred and aversion, some by pride, and so on and so forth. There are different kinds of forces of Maras. If you, at times of chanting Om Ahom, it crushes the forces of the 5 poisons. And the way we should see it is that all the external Maras are the Maras that's projected by our own inner poisons. Now, Vajra crushes the forces of hatred and aversion. There are all kinds of conflicts nowadays, conflicts among countries or among people or even among Sangha, the Sangha members. And then because of those hatred and aversion, it calls for the forces of Mara. With Guru, it crushes the force of pride, and Pema crushes the forces of craving and attachment. Siddhi crushes the force of jealousy. Hum crushes the force of gods, demons, and humans. Padmasambhava once said that with his prediction in a future time in the mind of the Tibetans, within the mind of the male there enters the Mara, the male Maras, and in the mind of the females enters the female Maras, and in the minds of the children enters into a spirit, the evil spirit. At different stages, there are different Maras that could control them or have powers over them. Well, that reminds me around the time of in the 50s or 60s. That was a very special period of time. In many different monasteries in Tibet, different kinds of destructive actions, such as destroying the Buddha statues and destroying the monasteries. Majority of them were done by ourselves, the Tibetans, and there were even people who had faith before. Their minds were completely under the force of Maras. Even people who had good practice, who had good characters and personalities, and who had beautiful outlooks or beautiful appearances, none of them really work But people were all under the power or the force of Mara. There is no freedom and no autonomy to themselves. They have no way to control themselves. At that time, if they can all chant the Padmasambhava mantra, then that would be really wonderful. All of these Maras would be subjugated. Ponso Rinpoche once talked about the pithy instructions given by Mipa Rinpoche. Around the time of the first Dudrum Rinpoche, there was a person who said he had already attained full enlightenment. His name was Vajra Sangye, and he said that he had already attained full enlightenment and told everyone that he was a Buddha. Because he thought he could fly, he jumped off from the roof of the house and got really hurt. And then later, the first Dudrum Rinpoche told him that, well, you didn't attain realization, rather you are deluded right now, you have confused thoughts. This person, however, thought that, oh, this Lama is jealous of my attainment, thinks that I have already surpassed him. So he went to Jayang Khyentse Wangpo and said that, well, what do you think? I think I attained realization. What do you think? And Jayang Khyentse Wangpo said, well, I think you're right, but I need to test it. In order to test it, you need to finish chanting 100 million times of 10 million times of Padmasambhava mantra. After you finish chanting it, then I can sign your certificate. Right after the time he finished chanting the 10 million times of Padmasambhava mantra, he had a dream that he was falling from the space and fell on the ground. Rather a monastic in his dream fell on the ground, and after that he had no delusion that he was completely enlightened. So in our daily life, in the worldly life, or in the practitioner's life, we encounter all kinds of forces, all kinds of demonic forces. And at that time, we should then chant the Vajra Guru Mantra. Sometimes when I encounter obstacles, I'm not afraid of them, but I would definitely chant the Vajra Guru Mantra. And sometimes I would also contribute as an offering to ask the Sangha to chant as well. Some of the wrathful forms of Vajra Guru, such as the red one that Ponso Rinpoche reviewed from the Taksang cave, I would place it right on top of my pillow, and then after 2 or 3 days, I really feel that the blessings are indeed true. I have no doubt of that. In this dark age, especially when the Maras, the forces of Maras, are going rampant and unstoppable sometimes, I prefer to chant the Vajra Guru Mantra, especially when I feel that, well, it's probably just too compassionate if I chant the mantra of Manjushri or the mantra of Avalokiteshvara. So it's probably better for me to chant something that's more powerful, which is the Vajra Guru Mantra, because his mantra has so much power to subjugating and to overcome those obstacles. In our life, on the path of practice, we may encounter all kinds of obstacles. So at that time, we need to use the image of Padmasambhava and then use the mantra of Padmasambhava, just as when a thief is stealing, if we were to have the police over, then the thief would definitely run away. Similarly, there are different kinds of balances of powers within this world. If we have one power too strong, then we need to have the other power to balance it, and that is the wisdom of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. On top of that, Padmasambhava is really of no difference to Shakyamuni Buddha, and Padmasambhava has the power to subjugating the forces of Maras. Well, if you don't believe it, it's okay. We didn't ask you to pay for any tuition for this class, but it's the best for you to practice it and see if it works. Now let's see, Om Mahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava. Om Mahom is the accomplishment of enlightened body, speech, and mind. By Vajra, the accomplishments of peaceful and wrathful deities are attained. By Guru, the accomplishments of awareness holder lamas are attained. By Padma, the accomplishments of the Dakinis and Dharma protectors are attained. By Siddhi, the supreme and common accomplishments are attained. By whom, whatever accomplishments you wish for is attained. Now we have lots of wishes nowadays, and we want to have our wishes accomplished. So over here, siddhi is accomplishment. If you want to attain whatever kinds of accomplishments, for example, wealth, food, clothing, fame, whatever is temporary or ultimate siddhis can be obtained. Because the Vajra Guru Mantra is like the wish-fulfilling jewel. Whatever you wish for, you will be able to gain it. Om Mahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava. Om Mahom transfers one to the primordial pure realm. Vajra transfers one to the eastern Buddha field of manifested joy. Guru transfers one to the southern Buddha field of glory. Padma transfers one to the western Buddha field of bliss. Siddhi transfers one to the northern Buddha field of all accomplished actions, and Hom transfers one to the central Buddha field of immutability. Now, for those of you who chant Amitabha mantra, if you chant the mantra of Vajra Guru, you will also be able to be reborn in Sukhavati. Or if you want to be reborn in the eastern Buddha field of manifest joy, then if you chant this mantra would definitely be able to help you to be reborn wherever you wish to be reborn to. And then Om Benza Guru Padmasambhava. Om Mahom. By Om Mahom, the level of the three kayas awareness holder is attained. By Vajra, the level dwelling awareness holder is attained. By Guru, the level of immortal life awareness holder is attained. By Padma, the level of the great seal awareness holder is attained. By Siddhi, the level of spontaneous presence awareness holder is attained. By Hom, the level of fully ripened awareness holder is attained. For those of you who studied Giragaba Tantra, then you would understand what awareness is. Awareness holder is Vidyadhara, the one that is holding awareness. This is taught by different schools, all the way between the first to the 10th bhumis. When we have the Vidyadhara Dharma assembly, there are the practices that we have to specifically practice to attain such realization. Now, in terms of the immortal life awareness holder, that is of the there are different levels of it, or different levels of it that could be attained. For example, the fruition of such Vidyadhara is awareness holder is of the mundane, and then there is the path of seeing, and then path of practice, and so on. Now, Om Mahom Benza Guru Padmasambhava, if you were to recite once, the Vajra Guru Mantra will grant you a physical body and entry into this world. Any sentient being who sees, hears, or thinks the mantra will definitely be established among the ranks of the male and female awareness holders. If we can practice altogether the mantra, then such merit would be so vast. For example, we talked about how the qualities and merits of taking refuge is vast, and then such qualities and merits of generating aspiration is difficult to be contained in this world. Similarly, the merits of chanting mantras is completely unfathomable, that cannot be filled in this world. And then the infallible, this is taught by the infallible Vajra Guru Mantra, is the word of truth. If what you wish for does not happen as I have promised, I, Padma, have deceived sentient beings. Absurd. Whatever the Vajra Guru had stated, Padmasambhava had stated, is the speech of truth. He would not deceive the sentient beings. Padmasambhava says that I speak only the truth, and I would not deceive sentient beings. I have not deceived you. It will happen just as I've promised. That is why the later generation, that is us, we need to practice what Padmasambhava had taught. We need to practice the mantra of Padmasambhava. I really hope many of you, I know that you want to chant, I know many of you who would chant 10 million times of mantras every year. Some of the lay practitioners are indeed very good. So this time I really wish that I can encourage you more to chant the mantra of Padmasambhava. Some of the Dharma practitioners, our fellow Sangha members, would chant 108 times of Padmasambhava mantra and continuously chant it for 12 or 20 years even. Some would chant 21 times of the 100 syllabus mantra, and some would chant other mantras. In fact, if you can chant 1,000 times every day, 100 times every day for 100 days, you would accumulate over 10,000 or 100,000. On the first day of 2023, I posted a weblog and said that I wish that there would be people who can chant 108 times of Vajra Guru Mantra along with me, because the merit would be great. And then I just checked that there were about 1.38 million times of read on that weblog, and that is only a part of it. I'm not sure if the majority of those people would make the aspiration to chant, but I didn't make the requirement for you to do so, because certain personnels asked me to be low-key at this moment. I need to be low-key at this moment. Let it be on the internet or different aspect. I think it's probably better for me not to speak too much of it. However, the Padmasambhava mantra, I really hope that through your own language or through other methods, if you can chant it, that would be really beneficial. That would be really wonderful, and many people would be benefited greatly through chanting this. There is nothing that violates the law by asking you to chant it or practice it. Well, simply spreading this teaching, or simply spreading or encourage others to chant this, there is nothing that is illicit about it. So you can try to encourage others to chant this mantra. In fact, this Padmasambhava mantra, I hope that you can chant it, and you can, through various ways, to chant it. Not only that, if you can make prayer flags with this mantra and put it on the top of mountains, then through wind, this mantra would be able to benefit sentient beings everywhere as well. Now that in many places, in order to protect the environment, it is not allowed to hang those prayer flags everywhere. Also, I hope that the fellow Sanghas over here, you don't hang those prayer flags everywhere around your house, because in that way, according to the Tibetan tradition or the customs, it is considered that you have died. That is why all the prayer flags are around your house. So it is the best to put it somewhere that is close, that is clean, not on metals, not on the ground, not around the side of the bridge. because there would be different, or the underneath the bridge, because underneath the bridge, that means different beings would step on top of the flags or on top of the mantra. That is not appropriate. There are great merits and qualities in terms of placing or hand those prayer flags, but it is not very convenient to do that nowadays. It's not convenient to hand those prayer flags, not convenient to release life. It is not convenient to practice smoke offering and so on and so forth. All of these things used to be the kinds of virtuous deeds I really enjoy doing, but because of different regulations, it is not convenient to practice them, to do them anymore. However, when we look at other phenomena in this world, in the society, if you want to create negative deeds, everything is convenient. Anyhow, we should not stop doing virtuous deeds just because they're not convenient. Other than that, in Tibet, we can see there are chiseled money rocks. The rocks that has mantras chiseled on them. Sometimes it's the money mantra, sometimes the other mantras. Right across the Larungar over here on the mountains, there are some Tibetan money mantra heaps of those money mantra rocks, and they form letters. That is Ijino praying to Ponsog Rinpoche, Ponsog Rinpoche, please grant your blessings. Though the Chinese corresponding Chinese characters are not the same. However, I think it is really important to chisel those mantras and place them around the road or the mountains. In that way, all the seeing, touching, and hearing and thinking of them would generate great merit. If you can carry the mantra with you at all times, that would be even better. Now that we have the liberation upon touching, and then through touching, or through through touching, and then if you put this mantra written on a blue paper with gold ink, and have that in your liberation through touch amulet or little bag, that would be really helpful. Back in 2016 or 2015, we made a really beautiful amulet that has both of the Padmasambhava mantra as well as the hair and clothing of Ponsog Rinpoche. That was made with lots of effort and thought. A lot of thoughts were put into it. If a person were to wear it at all the time, and at time of death, this particular mantra, you don't necessarily have to take it away from the body. You can keep it. In that way, this person would be able to be born in Sukhavati. If you can write the mantra of Vajra Guru, the quality is really great. So I really hope that you can write it more. Now that we don't have many people who would write it, but if you can print it, that's also really wonderful. And if you can't print it, now we have this virtual paper, and you can send it to others as well. In the past, we would use calligraphy, but now I think if you can send it to others, then the merit and quality is the same. So chanting, writing of this mantra, the merit is unfathomable. In order to benefit sentient beings of the future, Padmasambhava said that I will hide it in different places. Not so sure where Karma Limpa reviewed this particular term. Well, in the lineage, we usually would say that, well, it is the best. The benefit of writing, reading, and reciting Vajra Guru Mantra are immeasurable. For the benefit of sentient beings in the future, write this down and conceal it. May this meet with those of the fortune and merit, Samaya. For those with wrong views, this is sealed to secrecy and it is entrusted to those with pure Samaya. This was brought forth by Karma Limpa and copied down from a golden scroll. Through various kinds of merits and connect the causes and conditions, finally this particular terma was reviewed. Unlike the turtle nowadays, they would use various kinds of mundane tools to discover or review terma. In fact, back then, those termas are reviewed in a different way. Sometimes they are concealed in the wisdom realm, and sometimes the turtles would be able to remember the stories or remember the teachings given by Padmasambhava exactly as how he gave it. This is really by relying on the power of causes and conditions or of dependent origination. Well, some people asked whether my book of the memoir when Phuntsog Rinpoche went to India and Nepal was a terma. I said, well, it is not considered as a terma because it hasn't been for that long yet. It is in this lifetime, but not after many lifetimes. However, indeed, I remembered many of the things that happened back then through certain causes and conditions. I, for example, had an old calendar, and through that, I remembered many things. 1995, we went to different places and I asked Khenpo Sodargye whether he kept some calendar so that maybe that would be helpful to remember some of the things that had happened back then. In 1995, we went to Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong. A few of us, those of us who went to India, on top of that, also Khenpo Sodargye went there with us. When Phuntsog Rinpoche traveled abroad 3 times, I went with him for all those 3 times. And now I have already completed the memoir of traveling with him for the previous 2 times. Somehow, though the trip to Malaysia and Singapore is much closer to the timeline now, but it's very vague for both myself and Khenpo Sodargye. I only remembered Khenpo Sodargye and I were around the seaside and we were joking. Other things were rather quite blurry. We went to Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia. We were invited by a Karma Kagyu Center as well as the Dharma Center in Singapore, where Phuntsog Rinpoche taught the Maha'ati teaching of Manjushri as well as self-liberation of equality composed by Longchenpa. It lasted for about a month. I think it should be an easy project for me to finish. If I have causes and conditions, I would love to finish that. Anyhow, these tertones, through different causes and conditions, Padmasambhava said that they would be able to record it. After recording it, the teaching is infused with great powers and blessings. And these kinds of teachings are the true termas because they are endowed with great blessings and great power. When we study and practice terma, it would be the best for us to practice the ones that's already included in Rinchen Dzog. Now that there are many self-claimed self-claimed tertones, so it is best for us to rely on the ones that is trustworthy. Over here, he said that, well, meet with those of fortune and merit, samaya, jia, jia, jia. And for those with the wrong views, this is sealed to secrecy, jia, jia, jia. It is entrusted to those with pure samaya, jia, jia, jia. Well, I somehow remember, because jia, jia, jia means seals. When I went abroad, I remember that we got lots of seals on the passport. Similarly, in order to grant them to read or make connections, those fortunate disciples has the seals to read it, and for the ones that has wrong views, this is sealed to secrecy, and then seal. This particular text was reviewed by Karma Limpa, and his termas indeed has great blessings, including the 6 Bardo teachings, which is widely propagated. So later, I really hope that you can practice some of the 6 Bardo teachings, especially for those of you who have already finished your Ngöndro practices. So in the future, I would like to provide maybe some audios or videos because I've already finished giving teachings of the 6 Bardos for 10 years. Now, please supplicate to Karma Limpa and practice this termas, because the causes and conditions are indeed really wonderful, and I'm happy that we've already completed this teaching. Now, I hope you can chant the Vajra Guru Mantra constantly, and later, whenever we have more causes and conditions, we will have more teachings on it as well, because the merit and qualities of Vajra Guru Mantra is indeed very vast and profound. It's been many years because it was translated back in 2009 on August 26th, and today is on the 19th of August. It's been many years, and today let us make the dedication of merit together.